I find that is a threshold that is too great to get across, that you've got tens of thousands of intelligence officials and departmental, senior bureaucrats in these portfolios in Canberra, and not one of them thought either a call to the Prime Minister's office or a briefing note up through their ministers and across wasn't worth it about an issue of this scale. I just, I get when he says, if he's asked in a press conference, the PM says, look, I'm not going to discuss the intricacies of security briefings. I get that, right? But you show me where John Howard or Tony Abbott or Scott Morrison, even a Kim Beazley, wouldn't have been forthcoming to say, I've got a briefing, rest assured Australians, we've got this in hand.
Well, that's exactly right, Peta, and I've spoken to many people who worked in senior national security roles in the bureaucracy and in government over many years, and all of them said it would be inexplicable that the Prime Minister would not be briefed, that probably what would have happened in a routine way is that the Federal Police or ASIO would have briefed their relevant minister first, and that relevant minister would have said, well, we better tell the Prime Minister and we're probably going to need to convene a National Security Committee of Cabinet meeting. And in fact, those committee meetings should have been happening anyway. On a rolling basis, given how serious this crisis is. It shouldn't take bombing of a synagogue or a childcare centre or a roadside caravan bomb to require an NSC meeting. And in those NSC meetings, the Prime Minister should have been grilling the head of our intelligence and security agencies and our law enforcement agencies, saying, where are things up to? What's the full picture? Tell me what's happening. And if those meetings weren't happening and if he wasn't asking those questions, then that reflects on his disinterest in national security. And no wonder things have gotten as bad as they have.
Did it all happen because it was the Christmas New Year period? We know that he said, when I think it was your leader asking for a national cabinet meeting, he said, well, we're not going to do that. Everyone's on leave. I'm not bringing people back. We know Penny Wong was overseas. She was at the inauguration. We know that Mark Dreyfus, the AG, these are members of NSC for people at home. We know that he was away in Israel. Is it the fact that if he hasn't got the ministers around him, geeing him up to do his job, he's off on a frolic?
There's a couple of problems with that excuse, Peter. One is obviously the Prime Minister's job is a full-time job and it shouldn't go into hibernation over the summer holidays. The second is we called for a National Cabinet for 14 months, so presumably people weren't on leave for 14 months. And the third is even if some people were taking some leave over Christmas and New Year, this caravan was discovered on the 19th of January. The key people should have been well and truly back at work with their feet under the desk by then and on top of this issue. And if they weren't, it really it boggles the mind. I mean, NSC should have met and the Prime Minister should have made policy decisions on the basis of this incident to surge resources to our security and intelligence agencies, to establish a task force to get to the bottom of this, to reassure the Jewish community and any others who could be targeted and affected by these attacks that no stone was being left unturned from the highest office of the land to get to the bottom of this. None of that happened and all of that reflects on him.
Just before we go, James, I know you have to leave. Online neo-Nazi network, they've been hit with sanctions as they should. But how can they go after the neo-Nazis and we still have yet to deport a single hate preacher?
Well, that's exactly right, Peter. We strongly support the sanctions that the government has put in place on these neo-Nazi groups, but truthfully, that's just business as usual of government. That should just happen as a matter of course. It's nothing to be trumpeting or be particularly proud of, particularly when the government has failed to tackle so many other extremists in our community, whether it's Hizb ut-Tahrir or people here on visas inciting violence against their fellow Australians. In fact, not Australians in the case of those visa holders. No consequences have followed for those people. They haven't been charged, they haven't been arrested, they haven't been deported, and no wonder they've become emboldened. Things have got so out of control on this Prime Minister's watch. All
right, I don't want to get you into trouble. James Paterson, thank you as always.